Here we have an Apple Mac Mini from 2015 with dual-core Intel i5 CPU, 8 gigs of RAM and a very slow 5400 RPM hard drive. As it is a 10-year-old Intel-based Mac, it hasn't gotten any macOS upgrades for quite some time, and it is very slow, especially compared to any modern Apple Silicon Macs. Today, I'm going to give it a bit of a performance boost by upgrading it with an SSD or solid-state drive. The SSD I'm going to use is a trusty Samsung 870 that I've used in multiple builds before. And once this thing gets placed inside of this Mac, I'm going to install Ubuntu Linux as an operating system into it. Ubuntu usually works very smoothly even with older hardware, at least for any casual computing such as browsing the web and writing emails. Once done, I'm gonna gift it away to one of my elderly relatives to replace their old and very slow malfunctioning Windows PC. So now this Mac Mini gets a second life and a new purpose, which is great. I've always wanted to get myself some good tools, so I used this specific project as an excuse to buy some quality tools from iFixit, including this magnetic fix mat. This toolkit contains all kinds of opening and gripping tools, along with 64 different specialty driver heads, which may come handy when working on various electronics. That being said, you definitely don't need this whole set to open up a Mac Mini. Primarily, you're going to need a Torx Security 6 and 7 driver heads. Let's get started with opening up this Mac Mini. First, we need to use some kind of a prying tool to pry open the bottom cover, which then exposes the metallic bottom plate through which we can get access into the internals. Seems that we are greeted by some dust here, so it just proves that this is a very old machine. And it might be a good idea to clean this up a bit before actually continuing with the rest of the operation. On the metallic bottom plate, you can see a Wi-Fi antenna and 6 screws in total holding the plate in the body. We need to open those security Torx screws to remove that metal plate. Some guides say that these are specifically T6H screws, but it seems that TR6 driver works fine here as well. I don't really know the difference. TR6 is like a regular Torx 6 driver head, but with a small hole in the center of it. Personally, I think it's just a conspiracy to force people to buy some specialist tools and not allowing them to use the regular Torx drivers that they might already own. Notice the Wi-Fi antenna. It is attached onto the backplate. So be very careful when opening the plate, as the Wi-Fi antenna cable is connected to the logic port. Carefully lift the metallic plate on the side. Once fully open, you can see the Wi-Fi antenna cable running inside the edge of the body. Remove the cable holder screw. Once the cable holder screw has been removed, lift up the connector from the logic board. After disconnecting the cable, you can put aside the metallic backplate for now, and maybe clean it too while you have it in your hands. Our next task is to remove the cooling fan. It is held by 3 screws. The top screw is the longer one, connecting all the way through the logic board. Before lifting the fan out, you must remove the fan power cable from the logic board. This happens by just lifting the cable up, but it is a very tiny cable, so be careful. Next, we are going to remove the screw holding the flat cable connecting the hard drive to the logic board. Then we are going to remove the screw holding the logic board in the body. Now we can detach the flat cables from the logic board, starting with this. Once that is disconnected, then we move a bit to the left and we are going to detach the other flat cable from the logic board. Now we are ready to remove the logic board from the body itself or from the housing. We're going to do it by using a tool or tools that go into these two holes and then pull the logic board out from the side of the housing. As I was already purchasing some tools from iFixit, I noticed that they're selling this purpose-made tool for the job. It was about $5 or something like that, so quite an overpriced piece of metal. So you definitely can manage with some do-it-yourself solution or with 2 small screwdrivers, for example. But as I was already buying a bunch of stuff from iFixit, I thought, what the hell, why not? Let's add this to the shopping cart as well. And it's easier to turn this around and so that the logic board or the opening in the body is facing yourself. And it's really tight, so you're going to be using more force than you feel like you should. So it takes a little bit of an effort. The logic board finally snaps out of the housing a bit, but before pulling it out completely, we need to first remove the power cable that is connecting the power brick and the logic board. After that, the logic board should just slide out nicely. And now, basically, here we have the whole Mac Mini logic board that is powering the machine. Once we put the logic board out of the way, we are going to remove the screw holding the power brick inside the chassis. The power brick and the power cord plug attachment is a bit sketchy. We need to remove this small metal pin that is holding the power plug in correct position. After removing the pin, we can finally rotate the power plug itself 90 degrees counterclockwise. And by rotating it, it allows us to finally slide the power brick out of the chassis. This process can be somewhat tricky or, let's say, a bit finicky operation. But now we finally have the power brick outside of the chassis. Finally, we are getting to the point of actually removing the hard drive enclosure itself. It is held by this one screw, so let's unscrew it open and then we can slide the whole enclosure out through the top opening. Once we do that, we now finally have access to the original hard drive. This one apparently made by a company called HGST. And at the top you can see the power and data connection. And once we flip this on the other side, you can see the matching flat cables that are used to connect into the logic board. Now we are unscrewing the drive out from the enclosure. All the other screws in this process are TR6s, but surprisingly, the 4 screws that were holding the hard drive in place were actually slightly bigger TR7s, so something to keep in mind. And now you can see the flat cable. It is slightly glued into the bottom surface of the hard drive. Very, very gently detach the flat cable. It's gonna take a little bit of an effort to do it. You see this thing over here? This is a piece of tape preventing the connector from loosening. Very, very carefully peel away the tape and put it somewhere safe, as we are going to need it later once again when we install the new drive, the new SSD into the enclosure. Now we are disconnecting the hard drive from the connector. Here you can see that we have the standard SATA data and power connections. At this point, we are basically done with the disassembly process, and we can throw away the old and bring in the new. Let's quickly unpack the SSD. And oh, I realized we need to bring back the old drive for a second. We can transfer these two softener stickers into the new drive. I assume they are there to prevent vibrations, so in reality you don't really need them with the SSD as they don't produce any vibrations because, they are solid. But we might as well keep them and attach them to the new drive too. No harm done. And finally, we can actually throw away the old drive. Good riddance. Now attach the data and power connector into the new drive. Push it in firmly. And once that is done, take the piece of tape that we removed earlier and secure the connection with it. Put the new drive into the enclosure and make sure that the flat cable comes through the hole in the back meant for it in the enclosure. Screw the 4 Tier 7 screws in place that are holding the drive in the enclosure. Now slide the enclosure alongside the SSD into the chassis and then screw the tightening screw that holds the enclosure in its place. Slide the power brick inside the body. It in is a bit finicky. You need to remember to rotate the plug 90 degrees counterclockwise, and once it's inside, then rotate it back 90 degrees clockwise. Then we need to secure the plug with the metal pin, and that's gonna slide in from the center towards the edge underneath the plug, and that's gonna hold the plug in its correct position. So just slide it in and push it slightly. Fasten the screw that is holding the power brick in place inside the chassis. And now we are putting in the logic board, and of course verify that you're putting it in a correct position so that the power plug matches the back panel. It takes a little bit of an effort to get it in and align it properly. Before pushing the logic board completely in, remember to connect the power cable. It is a bit of a finicky process, but with a little bit help from some tools and having patience, you can do it. And now we need to connect back the flat cables to the logic board. They are really small, but you just push them down and they will go into their places. And now secure the logic board into the chassis using this one screw. And be careful to align the logic board properly or it won't tighten up. After which we need to attach one screw holding the flat cable. Now we are ready to attach the backplate. No, we are not ready to attach the backplate. I forgot the important part, the cooler and the fan. That was on my table in a separate place, so I totally forgot it, but luckily I remembered it before turning the machine on. So you need to attach the cable from the fan to the logic board, and then there are those three screws that you need to tighten up, two shorter ones and one longer one. And definitely do this before attaching the backplate. And in the rest of the video, I will continue, but you won't be seeing the cooler there yet, but you should have it in place before doing anything that I'm about to do next. And now we are about to install the Wi-Fi antenna into the logic board. It's a really small cable, so it takes a little bit of an effort to get it in a correct place. Remember also to screw in the screw that is holding the Wi-Fi antenna in its correct place. As again, it's a really small cable, so it can be loosened pretty quickly without the screw holding it in. And now I'm getting ready to put the backplate in, but while I was doing it, I realized my mistake that the Wi-Fi antenna was blocking the screw hole of the backplate. So make sure to position the Wi-Fi antenna cable in that manner that it goes inside the rim and it's not blocking any of the screw holes and it's not sticking between the outside of the rim and the plate itself. So be careful how the Wi-Fi antenna cable is positioned. And now finally we're able to attach the backplate into its correct position with the 6 TR6 screws. Now that the backplate is in its place, we can install the plastic bottom cover. You just align it to match the 3 longer screws and then you just push it in. And now we have done an SSD upgrade to the Mac Mini. You could use the Internet Recovery to install macOS into it, but as this is an old machine, it doesn't support the latest macOS versions. So as said before, I'm gonna install Ubuntu Linux into it, but that's another topic. Hopefully you found this video useful. Until next time, see ya.